The rain kept thundering down that July 22nd, 1988 night. Outside, it was pitch black. The rain wouldn't stop, and it was making it almost impossible to drive back to West Canyon, Colorado in his Volkswagen. Dr. Perry Nelson was driving to Denver, and his buddy Gary Starr Adams was sitting in the passenger seat. Dr. Nelson knew he wouldn't be able to make it to Denver in this weather. The best option would be for them to stop alongside the road to get some shut-eye before heading back home in the morning. He didn't realize that stopping alongside the road was the worst decision he ever made. Yet Gary, who was sitting in the passenger seat beside Perry, was glad that everything was going as planned. He needed to get rid of Perry. You see, Gary, he was sleeping with Perry's wife, Sharon Nelson, and if he killed Perry, he would get to have Sharon for life, so he thought. And he would also get to cash in on some of her insurance money from her husband's death. When Perry parked beside the road, Gary got out of the car. He told Perry he wanted to take a leak, but that really wasn't the reason why he wanted to get out of the car. He walked down to the creek trying to find the best rock to use to shatter Perry's skull. He picked up a few, but neither one of them seemed the right size. Then he found one that was the right size and seemed to be heavy enough to cause enough damage. He looked around the area to make sure he could remember the location and the rock. He didn't want to have to be fumbling for a rock when the time came to kill Perry, which was only minutes away. Meanwhile, in his VW, Perry was getting the car ready for Gary to sleep. He pushed the seats down, trying to make the car as comfortable as he could for his friend, the same one who would be betraying him. Then he heard Gary call out for him.
"Hey, Perry, I need your help. I lost my watch out here. Can you help me find it?"
And like a good friend, Perry thought nothing of going out to help Gary. He grabbed a hold of his flashlight and followed Gary to the spot where he supposedly lost his watch. So today, Crime Salad listeners, Ricky and I have a deadly true crime story for you. And we can't wait to tell you what happens next. But first, we need to cover some events that happened earlier so you can get an understanding of what happened. Now, just be warned, this narration includes details of violence, suicide, and abortion.
We have such a good episode for you, and I'll have to say, it is double deadly. It's actually so deadly that we have to break this up into 2 parts. There's just so many details for one episode.
And we're going to begin by discussing Sharon Nelson Harrelson.
It's a mouthful.
It is, and you'll see why. But other people may know her as the Black Widow Killer. And did you know that the nickname Black Widow Killer is a name that has been a title given to women who murder their romantic partners or spouses because it draws a parallel to the behavior of the Black Widow spider? In nature, female Black Widows are known for occasionally killing and consuming their male counterparts after mating, making the metaphor quite fitting for cases where women are accused or convicted of killing their significant others.
Do you think the male spiders know that that's coming? Are they like, well, it's worth it?
I don't think. I think they're just blinded by love.
That might be it.
Now, people around her had noticed this trend when they got to know her. She would seduce men, and then she would tear them away from their wives and their children. She would then marry them, and then she would kill them. They never knew it was coming.
Just like that love-blind Black Widow spider, you know? They didn't know.
He didn't.
He's just a handsome guy looking for a mate. What I don't understand, though, is how did they not have a clue? Like, were there no red flags? How could the men not know?
I'm not really sure how they didn't know. Those who knew Sharon knew that there just wasn't something right with her heart. They just felt like something was strange about her.
Right. But the men, I guess, like we said, they're just love blind.
Exactly. One thing is that she couldn't do it alone. She actually had her boyfriend help her with the murder. And even though she was married, she still kept seeing her boyfriend. His name was Gary Starr Adams, and he was obsessed with her. He would do just about anything for her. Now, let's rewind a little bit to how this all happened. One of her first victims was Dr. Perry Nelson, an optometrist. This is the same man that we mentioned in the introduction who was driving the vehicle with Gary in the passenger seat. It was the summer of 1976 when the two first met. Sharon and her family had just moved to La Junta, Colorado from Durham, North Carolina, and Sharon's husband at the time, Minister Michael Fuller, had been relocated to preach in Colorado. He was a Seventh-day Adventist pastor, and Sharon had been raised in a Seventh-day Adventist home.
Seventh-day Adventist? What type of religion is that?
So the Seventh-day Adventist is a Protestant Christian religion, but we'll get into the religion in a little bit. There's experts that say religion played a part into what made Sharon become a murderer. So the Fuller family, they didn't make this trip to Colorado under the best circumstances. First of all, when the family of four arrived to La Junta, Colorado, Minister Mike and Sharon's two girls, Rochelle and Denise, they weren't feeling very well. They both had diarrhea. Then, when they went to see their house, they discovered that the builder never finished the house. He had become bankrupt and ran off before finishing the construction. And so they had to get a motel that first night. And while the pastor slept, Sharon was up with the sick girls. And that wasn't the worst of it. So before arriving to La Junta, Colorado, the family lived in Durham, North Carolina, where Minister Fuller was the pastor of another church. But when the church elders found out that Sharon was having an affair with one of the parishioners, the church decided that Minister Fuller's career was over in North Carolina. So Sharon, she actually fell in love with a man named Craig and had an affair with him. She considered him to be a tender and sensitive lover, and her husband, Mr. Fuller, he was never tender or sensitive. She blamed her husband for her roaming heart. And this wasn't the first time that Sharon had an affair. When they lived in Cleveland, Ohio, Sharon worked as a secretary at a Cleveland printing business. And at the age of 23, Sharon was young and beautiful. And she realized when she walked into a room, her body was a magnet for men's eyes. And she began to use those assets to her benefit. One of the first to fall victim to Sharon's suggestive behavior was her boss. He was 50, and he was old enough to be her father. And he was married with 2 children of his own. Now, at the time, Sharon and Minister Fuller had no children of their own.
It was like Sharon wanted to be the center of attention. She wanted all eyes on her.
Yeah, exactly. She craved people, specifically men, and the power she held over them. And it wasn't long before Sharon became pregnant. And the father was not her husband. It was actually the man with whom she was having an affair.
Oh.
Yeah, she kept the truth about the baby's father a secret. That was until she and Mike got into this huge fight months after Rochelle was born. It was August of 1969, and Mike told her that he knew that she was sleeping around. He screamed at Sharon.
You have an hour to tell me what's going on here, or I'll throw you out of the house and you'll never see the baby again. No child needs a slut for a mother.
Those are some harsh, cruel words. And Sharon didn't know how to respond. Minutes began to pass by, and Sharon thought her best choice was to give her husband a name. Since he already knew the truth, she might as well tell him the name. Then Mike asked, well, where does he live? Sharon wouldn't give him an address. You only asked me for a name, she yelled at him. During a time where at least every household had a phone book, Mike ran to the phone book directory to look up the man's address. Then he was out the door. Sharon didn't want confrontation to occur. It would not look good to the congregation.
It's funny that she's thinking about how this would look to the church's parishioners when an affair is already such an eyesore on the church's reputation.
Yeah. So Sharon, she called up a mutual friend, and she asked him to stop Mike from doing anything stupid or dangerous. It was the thought that such an incident could taint Mike's reputation that the man agreed to help. It's for the good of everyone involved, Sharon told him. And this mutual friend was able to stop Mike from doing anything. But that didn't end the fighting between the couple. Later that night, Sharon dropped a bombshell for the minister. You have given me enough personal digs. You have put me down long enough. Rochelle is not even yours. And the days at the Cleveland parish were numbered. The minister may not have made a scene, but parishioners knew about the affair. Minister Mike and his family moved to Duluth, North Carolina to head another church. And while Rochelle was not the minister's biological daughter, he treated her as such. He knew her being born from another father was not her fault.
This seems like it was a pattern for her. I don't understand why Sharon felt the need to stray.
I'm not sure either. I think maybe it could have had something to do with her childhood, because Sharon grew up in a home with Seventh-day Adventists. Her parents, Morris and Josephine Douglas, they were very strict, but that's because the Seventh-day Adventists is a strict religion. Now, since religion plays an important part of this story, it might be useful to give a little bit of history about the religion. American preacher William Miller is the one who started the Seventh-day Adventists. And when he preached, he told his parishioners that the second coming or advent of Jesus was imminent. He predicted the day would come about sometime in 1844. But when Jesus did not appear on that day, the day became known as the Great Disappointment. And as a result, many of the congregation members left. But still, preacher William Miller had followers. There were enough followers that by 1852, 15 ministers were a part of the movement, and the congregation was steadily growing. Today, according to a BBC article, the church has concentrated a lot on education. There are about 7,000 schools worldwide and more than 100 colleges and universities.
Okay, now that's a lot of homework.
And the religion has strict restrictions, so parishioners can't smoke or drink alcohol. Also, the religion recommends a vegetarian diet. Now, the religion dictates that meat is allowed, but it's only allowed if those preparing the meat follow the biblical directions on clean and unclean food. A lot like how the Jewish and Islamic religion have kosher food. But Sharon and her two sisters, Joy and Judy, had even stricter rules. They couldn't dance, go bowling, watch TV, or drink caffeine. Occasionally, when Sharon ran errands around with her father, he let her have a can of soda, but with a warning not to tell her mom. And in most homes, siblings play with one another. However, in the Douglas household, playing with one another was not allowed. Mrs. Douglas kept Sharon separated from her older sister because she didn't want any fights or any noise. Judy, Sharon's sister, once said of the situation between her and Sharon, "Mom kept us apart. The fact Sharon has no feelings or emotions or can't show them might be based in part of the fact that she was isolated by her mother."
Not to mention all of the punishments they had too.
Right. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Douglas, they were believers in corporal punishment. They had multiple methods for spankings, hairbrushes, switches, or the metal grid of an ice cube tray. Whenever Sharon or Judy misbehaved, their parents told them to go outside to cut a switch off a bush, and their mother was known for looking over the switch to see if it was the right one for the job. Sometimes she would say, "That won't do. This one doesn't make the right sound. Get another."
Also, don't forget about the praying.
Yeah, so both Judy and Sharon thought the worst thing was the incessant praying. If they did something wrong, Judy said, "We were sent to our rooms where Mother would pray us to death. We'd sit there for an hour and a half and were told to think how evil we were and how we had displeased God and shamed the family. Then Mother would come in and talk about it for an hour. Then we'd pray." The environment was just so severe there. Judy couldn't wait to get out of that home. She ran away when she was just 16 years old. And she would later say, "If I had stayed, maybe I would have got the education I deserved. Maybe I would not have married an abusive man. But leaving was my sanity. It was the right thing to do. It was not rebellion. It was survival." Sharon and I learned different ways to survive. However, Sharon, she was barely 20 when she left her childhood home. She was still trying to find her own way to survive, and her parents were forcing her to marry a man by the name of Mike Fuller.
Wait, the minister? That was a forced marriage?
Yeah. Sharon knew her 1963 wedding in November was a complete mistake. The invitations were in the mail when the young Sharon sat her parents at the kitchen table crying. She told them that she didn't want to get married. She wasn't in love, and she tried to do everything she could to convince her parents. But Morris Douglas would not budge. He told her, "You'd be a damn fool to pass up this chance. He's going to be a minister. He's making something of himself." However, 3 days after the JFK assassination, on November 25th of 1963, Sharon got married. Sharon felt trapped in that marriage. She did what she could to make Mike happy, and she smiled at the parishioners. She baked cookies for the wives. She batted her eyes for the old men in the Adventist governing body. She typed up newsletters, sermons, and meeting minutes, helped out with the youth camp, and taught Bible lessons. But she wasn't doing anything for herself. She didn't know who she was at the time. Maybe it seemed that Sharon was trying in her marriage. However, one night while they were still living in Ohio, after she had already begun her affairs, she woke up to overhear Mike on the phone. She heard him say about her, "I never loved her. She's like a millstone around my neck." She knew then the marriage had been a big mistake from both sides of the marriage.
At that point, it seems like they're both on the same page then. So why not just divorce?
Well, it just wasn't that easy, and she wasn't stopping there. When the family moved to Colorado, she was on the prowl for someone new. That's how Dr. Perry Nelson came into the picture. Back to Colorado, the Fuller family had just arrived at the state, and they were holed up in a motel. Mike returned home from work one afternoon with what he thought was good news. One of the church elders had invited the family for dinner. His name was Dr. Perry Nelson. Mike probably thought that they were making friends. Maybe he thought Sharon wouldn't be so lonely.
Well, I guess he was right about one thing. He might have solved her loneliness problem.
Yeah, because when Dr. Nelson saw Sharon, it was like a fatal attraction at first sight. Dr. Nelson was a well-to-do elder at 43 years old with 2 optometry offices, one in Rocky Ford and the other in Trinidad. These were nearby offices. And he had married his high school sweetheart, Julie Nelson, and they had 3 children together, Tammy, Kathy, and Lori. The youngest one, Lori, was a teenager in high school. Dr. Nelson was popular in southeastern Colorado, and he was handsome. He stood at almost 6 foot 3 inches tall. He had hazel eyes, a clipped salt and pepper beard with medium brown hair. Although it was thinning a bit on top, he weighed 180 pounds. Dr. Nelson was very easy on the eyes, as some would describe. And Sharon would admit that to anyone. But she also targeted him for something else too, his money. The doctor was humble. He did not like to brag or show it off. In fact, he didn't like to spend his money except for when it came to his daughters or their mother. He made sure that they had everything they wanted and needed. Parishioners still knew that he was rich. The motorhome and airplane were evidence of the income that he made, and Sharon had factual evidence. She had gone through the church records looking for wealthy parishioners, and she came upon Dr. Nelson's file.
It's a little conniving, don't you think?
I think it's a little conniving. Now, this is not the first time the doctor strayed, but Sharon's conniving actions brought it all to light. One of his weaknesses was women. He had multiple affairs, but he always returned to his wife, Julie, and Julie always took him back. One time it got so bad that Julie left the house, but she returned because of the promises that Dr. Nelson made to her. Now, this relationship with Sharon, it was a little different. Family and friends didn't understand the hold that Sharon had on the doctor. That night of the dinner, the Fullers were not the only ones who were invited. They had also invited another couple, Blanche and Carl Wheeler. They were also church parishioners. When they left that night, Blanche turned and looked at her husband. "I don't know why, but I just feel uncomfortable around her." Carl answered her, "She's out looking." At first, Blanche was confused. She didn't know what her husband meant, and he clarified, "You know what I mean, for a man."
He wasn't wrong.
He wasn't wrong. And if you asked Sharon to compare the two men, Mike and Perry, she would provide a list of negatives for her husband. She would say Mike was impatient and gruff. He didn't care about anyone or anything except his church position. He certainly didn't care about her needs. But Perry, Sharon would say, he was different. He was warm, the kind of warmth that healed. He was funny, a playful kind of fun. He wasn't boring. Sharon said, Perry was so easy to talk to. It was like I'd known him my whole life. We just fell into a real easy friendship. The men who saw Sharon could see why the doctor fell for the seductress. She didn't wear the same type of clothes most females wore in Colorado, like the denim pants and boots most women wore in the area. Many figured Sharon's style fit the big Eastern cities. Even now, her outfits may have turned heads. People described her as having a sensual style. She wore her hair long. The dresses that she wore were tight, but fortunately, she had the body for those dresses. And if she wasn't in the mood for a dress, she would normally unbutton her blouses one button lower than what it should be. She wore short shorts like Daisy Duke shorts. They were the kind of shorts where her butt cheeks showed from underneath. And she barely wore any makeup. If she did, she coated her lips with lip gloss over cherry-flavored chapstick and mascara. But anyone with eyes could see her beauty. And it wasn't unusual to see her with a cigarette sticking out of the corner of her mouth, giving her the appearance of a rebellious woman straight out of a magazine. The doctor and Sharon may have said that they were keeping their affair a secret, but it was obvious to most who witnessed them together. Mrs. Barb Rachetti may have been the first to know about the affair. She worked in Dr. Nelson's Trinidad office. She ran the office, booked appointments, ordered lenses, and repaired eyeglass frames. Well, one day, Dr. Nelson came in and said he needed Barb's help to train a new girl. And can you guess who this new girl was?
Sharon.
Yeah, it was Sharon. He was giving Sharon a part-time office assistant position. Barb said the affair wasn't hard to see. Before bringing in Sharon for training, he had already mentioned her name 100 times beforehand. And when the doctor was training her, she wasn't taking any notes as any other new employee would. And Barb said of Sharon, she came in all lovey-dovey. There was no breaking in. Let's face it, she went into his examining room and she was supposed to take notes. And they just kidded around and everything.
So she wasn't there to learn anything. She was just there to try to get into somebody's pants.
And that someone is the doctor's pants.
Right.
And the doctor wasn't stopping Sharon at all. He was actually enjoying this exciting new adventure. And Barb also noted that the lunch schedule was another indicator. So Dr. Nelson was a stickler for the schedule. He didn't like anyone being late. He chewed Barb out because once she was 10 minutes late for work. But that first day when Sharon came into the office, Perry told Barb to go to lunch at 11 a.m. And she didn't have to return to the office until 1 p.m.
Hey, girl, pick your battles.
Normally, lunch was at noon, and he never, ever changed the time. Perry and Sharon just wanted some privacy for some one-on-one training time alone. Now, while Barb knew what was happening, she didn't dare tell his wife, Julie. She didn't want to break Julie's heart. Again, she respected Dr. Nelson too, and she figured he would realize his mistake, as he always did, and he would return to his wife. One of Dr. Nelson's offices was in a building called the Watkins Medical Arts Building, and Dr. Nelson and Sharon may have thought that they were keeping the affair hush-hush, but everyone knew of the hiding place in the building where they stowed away notes to one another.
Notes? Like love notes?
Yeah, exactly. And the doctor was proud of his notes. Once he walked up to Barb with one of the messages, and he said to her, "Look at what my doll left me today." Barb looked at the message and wondered what had gotten into her boss. The love note was something teenagers would write to one another. Barb wasn't one to keep her thoughts to herself, and she told Perry, "Oh, doctor, you ought to let this go. It's ruining your life."
Not only did it ruin his life, killed him.
You know, sometimes you just really need to take advice of those who just know you best, and Barb knew him. Barb's like, just stop. What are you doing? Things took a turn in September of 1976 when Sharon called up Blanche asking if she could practice at the piano to sing a song where she was planning to perform at the next Sabbath. And Blanche, at this time, she was already busy with organizing her daughter's wedding. She was getting married on September 5th. But in the middle of all this chaos, Blanche thought she could squeeze her in and make some room for Sharon. She may not have been fond of Sharon, but she wanted to help out the minister. Blanche thought that she was helping. Then she saw the real reason why Sharon had asked to come over. She had timed her visit to coincide with Perry's visit. He was supposed to drop off his motorhome so that Blanche's out-of-state guest would have a place to stay. As soon as Perry arrived, Sharon jumped off the piano bench and went to greet the doctor. Blanche felt used. And she talked to her husband, Carl, and they both thought it was time to tell Minister Mike what his wife was up to.
Narc.
They wanted him to know. They felt like he had a right to know. They didn't think the affair was Minister Mike's fault at all. However, the conversation did not go the way they intended it. When Blanche and Carl told the pastor what had happened, he became agitated. He was defensive about it all. It just didn't make sense. And he defended his wife. He said both Sharon and Perry are just outgoing individuals, and it is easy to make a mistake and assume that the two are having an affair. But at the end of the conversation, Blanche and Carl were embarrassed to even have brought up this topic. Now later, the Wheelers reviewed the conversation in their heads. They sat down and they talked about it, and they tried to think of a different way they could have approached the situation. And then they realized the minister's comments were like denials, as if he was trying to cover up for Sharon. And that made them wonder, had the minister been in this similar situation in the past? Now that night, all hell broke out at the Fuller home. The minister was angry about what he had heard, and he naively thought that Sharon had left her bad habits in the past, in North Carolina, in Ohio, now they're in Colorado, and he shouted, "We can't be anywhere without you sleeping with somebody." And Sharon, she didn't admit that she was having an affair. She used denial. She yelled back, "Nobody saw me do a damn thing. You're taking that bitch's word that something is going on. And if you sat in the lobby and listened, you would hear Perry call 90-year-old women doll or sweetie."
Well, I'm sure he didn't believe her at this point because he's already been burned by her multiple times.
Yeah, exactly. And he was right not to believe her because on September 27th of 1976, Sharon left the minister and her 2 children for the doctor. That night, the minister waited outside of Mrs. Perry Nelson's door, and he was there to tell her that her husband was having an affair with his wife. He let out everything that he knew. And he told her Rochelle wasn't really his biological daughter. And he explained to Julie that he thought Colorado would be a new start for the family. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And it took a minute for Julie to comprehend everything the minister was telling her. She thought maybe, just maybe, the minister might be mistaken. She suggested they call Barb, the doctor's secretary, to see if she knew where the doctor was and to check on their safety. At 10:30 p.m., Mrs. Nelson didn't know the whereabouts of her husband, and Barb didn't know where the doctor was. She only knew that the doctor had left with Sharon at about 5 p.m. Then, a few minutes later, Mrs. Nelson's phone rang. It seems like a big coincidence that the phone rang after Mrs. Nelson talked to Barb.
Kind of seems like Barb might have called Mr. Nelson to let him know.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Like, hey, your wife's calling me. You should probably check in with them. And Dr. Nelson told his wife about Sharon, and he confirmed what Minister Mike had told her. He said, "I've never loved anybody like the way I love her."
I don't know. To me, that's kind of like a slap in the face.
It was a slap in the face to Miss Nelson, too. She cried, "What makes you think you can trust each other with your histories? I'd hate to be her and trust you. How are you going to trust her?" For Perry, the answer was simple. "We love each other," he said. And Mrs. Nelson didn't respond. In some ways, maybe she felt some kind of relief.
Maybe the best thing to happen was for him to leave her. Then she wouldn't be desperately clinging on to any lost hope.
Yeah, the separation was a messy one, though. Sharon could have just packed her bags and left. She could have just said, you know what, that's it, close the door. But suddenly she decided that she needed to take care of her mental health. She could feel people within the community staring at her and silently judging her. She called a friend who was a counselor and a Seventh-day Adventist in Texas, and the counselor told her to drive down to Texas. Sharon agreed because she wanted help. Now, you may think it's great that Sharon is getting help. A Seventh-day Adventist counselor would advise Sharon to stay with her family and to leave the doctor behind. And this is exactly what Sharon did. But this course of action only delayed the inevitable. The divorces between the minister and Sharon and the doctor and Julie. The counselor straight up told Sharon how she felt. She said, "You really want Mike to love you more than anything. You're testing him to see if he'll take you back after you've been such a naughty girl." Also, Minister Mike didn't want a divorce. He wanted to give Sharon another chance. He knew the girls deserved to be with their mother. He even flew from Denver to Dallas to meet with Sharon. And it was a hard reunion. Both shed tears. Sharon agreed she wanted to save the marriage too. Yet Sharon kept complaining that night to her husband, saying if he had been there for her, she would have never found love and comfort in another man's arms.
I feel like Minister Mike must have known on some level that the marriage was doomed to end.
Oh yeah, most definitely, because this is like an ongoing thing. But he wanted to give it a try. Now, after parishioners found out about the affair, the church moved Minister Mike again to a new church in Arvada, a Denver suburb, just when they had left North Carolina to Colorado. Mike hoped this move would be a new start for the family, but he knew too well. Sharon had a wandering heart. And some may say that Sharon tried too. She took a job as a hospital staffing coordinator near Denver. So if someone was out due to illness or if the snowy weather trapped people in their houses, it was Sharon's job to make sure substitutes were in place to get all the hospital work completed. And during these days, Mike had a steadfast rule. There was no talk with the doc.
The doc being Perry, right?
Yeah. Now, Sharon would say that she tried to adhere to these rules. Every once in a while, she would call up the Trinidad optometry office for an update from Barb. And she also mailed the doctor a few notes.
She must have taken this as no face-to-face contact, but somehow saw this as a loophole.
Yeah, either a loophole, but most people knew Sharon was interpreting the rule her way. She was also drinking more too. So during work, she would mix vodka with fruit juice, and at night she would drink a 6-pack of beer. She missed the doc. And the doctor was under her spell. He wasn't the same with Sharon gone. He moped around and he thought of her every day. He wanted to be with her. And he did the same thing that Sharon was doing. He secretly communicated with her. He sent her a silver music box that played Somewhere My Love. And when Sharon received this special gift, she knew that she was going to get back with him. She thought Dr. Perry was the love of her life. She was going to finally say goodbye to her life with the minister, a life that bored her and that she just hated. She immediately quit her job and moved out of her husband's home, and she told him he could have everything except the sofa, her sewing machine, and her final paycheck. And if you can take a wild guess at what happened next, she told her husband that she was visiting her older sister, Judy, who lived in Colorado Springs. Now, technically, she did go to visit her, but the plan was for Perry to meet her there. That night, they reunited. Perry and Sharon went to a motel in Manitou Springs where they made love all night long. And the two were happy. Their dream came true. They were together, but the happiness didn't last long. When Sharon first left, Mike let her have the girls. They had not gone to court yet, and in the eyes of the law, she was their mother and they should be with her. That didn't stop Mike. He knew Sharon was a horrible mother. Sleeping around, smoking, drinking. And when Sharon had left with Perry for the first time, she had taken Rochelle with her. Rochelle was in the motel room the two had rented when they were shacking up together.
Ugh, that's pretty messed up.
Now, after seeing the evidence, the courts agreed. The girl should stay with the minister, even Rochelle. Although she wasn't the minister's biological daughter, the courts thought she would have a better and safer life with her stepdad than with her biological mother. So Mike went up to Judy's home where Sharon was staying with Rochelle and Denise with an El Paso County Sheriff deputy and his friend, Mr. Carl Wheeler. And Sharon didn't put up much of a fight. Mike had the custody paperwork showing that he was the parent with custody. Sharon couldn't do much about it, and she never appealed the decision. Later, Mike would take the children back with him to Ohio, and he wrote Sharon a letter saying that she could still have visits, Christmas break, and 1 week during the summer, but she would have to be the one to provide the transportation. And as for Dr. Perry's wife, Julie, she quietly bowed out of the scene. Once she realized Perry was staying with Sharon forever, she took Lori out west to California to start a new life there. Then on July 1st of 1977, the doctor and the former preacher's wife, Sharon, exchanged vows.
The same couple that created scandal after scandal.
Yeah. And they didn't get married in a church because the church governance forbade the two from being parishioners in the church after the humiliating incidents they created within the church. So instead, they got married in a private ceremony at the St. Francis of Assisi mission in Taos, New Mexico. They got married and their family grew too. In March of 1978, Sharon gave birth to Danny, and in 1980, she gave birth to Dr. Nelson's youngest daughter, Misty. So within 3 years, their family of 2 increased to a family of 4. They made a lovely family, at least on the outside. In the inside, though, things were falling apart. Money was a big issue for the family.
But when Sharon met the doctor, wasn't he doing pretty well?
He was. He had the office in Trinidad and the other location. He was making well over $150,000 a year. However, when she married him, he started having other expenses too. He had to pay alimony. He had to pay child support. There were taxes too. If anything, Sharon needed to rake in her spending. Sharon knew all of this, but she didn't care. And customers stopped going to him. No matter how popular he was before his Sharon days, clients heard about the affair and decided Dr. Nelson may not be the best optometrist for them after all. And what's worse, Perry didn't know how to say no. When Sharon wanted a new dining room table, he purchased it for her. When Sharon bought herself a new car, he allowed it. And in the same way Scarlett from the story/movie Gone with the Wind, who cherished her family plantation, which she named Tara, Sharon envisioned building her family a spectacular home she called Roundhouse, with Perry paving the way to make it all happen. Sharon had picked a spot for the family's hideaway. It would be in Weston, Colorado, and it was about 30 miles from Trinidad. It was a breathtaking location where snow-capped mountains bordered the horizon. And on clear days, viewers could see New Mexico's Baldy Mountain break the horizon. Sharon wanted a magnificent house, and Sharon got what she wanted. So the house's focal point was a 6-sided room, and it was most likely the room where she would greet guests. The room had a cathedral ceiling and a freestanding double flute fireplace. The wraparound deck was 8 feet wide by 120 feet long. The master bedroom also had a cathedral ceiling and an outside entrance. The rooms looked like they were taken out of a fairy tale.
Outside entrance? Is that so she can sneak other dudes in?
Maybe they're throwing stones at her window. These rooms were so grand and sophisticated, but the kitchen and the children's rooms looked like any other kitchen or children's room. There was nothing grand about it. These differences showed the priorities that Sharon had. She wanted everyone to look at her, and these were the things that were important to her. That included her bedroom and the living room. However, she, as some people would say, did view her children as being important.
That's great and all, but what about her other children? The ones she left behind?
Right. And as you can understand, Sharon, she had a thirst for money. She just kept spending. She had a thirst for something else too, sex. Sleeping with Perry just wasn't cutting it. She needed more. She began sleeping with one of Perry's best friends, Buzz Reynolds. Buzz was 10 years older than Sharon, and he was the kind of man Sharon liked. He was rich, he was a self-made rancher. Neighbors, friends, and townspeople wondered why Sharon couldn't have more discretion. Couldn't she start having sex with men who weren't good friends with her husband? This time around, Sharon didn't make any attempt to hide her affair or show her outrage for her husband, the doctor. One morning after Sharon started staying with Buzz and sleeping with him, she stopped by the optometry office to pick up her check. She also needed to talk to her husband, the doctor. Barb, the receptionist, could hear the heated arguments over everything: money, marriage, Sharon's affairs. They were screaming at each other. Minutes after arguing, Sharon barged out of the back office, furious. Barb could hear her say, "I'll tell you what, if that son of a bitch does not give me a divorce, I'll blow his fucking head off. I'll kill him."
Wow, that's telling.
Meanwhile, Barb sat at her desk thinking about the doctor. Bless his heart, she thought. That man was no match for his bitch-on-wheels wife, a nickname she had given Sharon. If only Perry could see into the future, maybe he would have taken what Sharon said as a warning. Living with Sharon had changed Perry too, for the worse. He began drinking and stopping by bars. Cursing and swearing became a part of his day-to-day vocabulary. Once Perry came into the office drunk, slurring his words, and Barb had to pull him aside to tell him that he was in no condition to be seeing clients that day. The patients can smell the booze on his breath and they wouldn't like it. Barb described the transformation. I never heard him say one bad word until Sharon. And then, it was like he was full of the devil. He just did a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You might say he turned from good to bad. And poor Perry, his debt kept increasing. Towards the end, he owed hundreds of thousands of dollars. He still owed $120,000 on Sharon's roundhouse. He had to pay the IRS more than $100,000. The state of Colorado expected Perry to pay the government $80,000 in back taxes and penalties. And he also owed multiple lens labs between $5,000 and $10,000 apiece. Due to Perry not being able to make the monthly payment on his Bronco, his car was about to be repossessed. And at one point, Perry thought killing himself was the only option. He entered the office with his clothes appearing disheveled. He looked pale and exhausted, and he told Barb when she asked him what's wrong, "Oh, Barb, I'm going to end it all." Right away, Barb became worried. She watched him throughout the morning to make sure that he was okay. At lunch, she went straight to one of Perry's friends and told him she believes Perry may be thinking of suicide. And the friend said that he would stop over to see Perry after work. But Barb insisted that he needs to come sooner, after work, maybe too late. He needed to see Perry now, and the friend followed Barb's advice. And it's a good thing Perry's friend went to go see him too, because when he arrived, he found the doctor sitting in his Bronco. It had not been repossessed yet, and Perry had tears streaming down his face, and he had a loaded revolver in his hands. At least he hadn't pulled the trigger. And his friend cheered him on, encouraging him to stop with his negative thoughts. His friend told him things will get better. And at that moment, on that day, Perry believed him. He put the gun away. However, things never got better. Now that Christmas, Sharon gave him the biggest surprise, and it was not a good kind of surprise either. In hopes of seeking reconciliation with his wife, Perry had invited her to the roundhouse to have dinner with their children, Misty and Danny, and to Sharon some gift giving. But Sharon had something else on her mind. She had a shocking revelation. She was pregnant with Buzz Reynolds' baby. She was carrying the baby of one of his best friends.
Wow, what a Christmas surprise. At this point, Perry's already losing it. He's in severe debt, and now she's expecting him to raise someone else's baby, his best friend.
Friends, right? Yeah, and his response to his wife was if they ever wanted to give their marriage another chance, she would have to abort the baby. And after Christmas, Sharon discovered that the father of her future baby, Buzz, was not very enthusiastic about the baby either. When he found out that she was pregnant, he couldn't kick her out of the house fast enough. So now here was Sharon, moneyless, no home. Her two oldest children were in Ohio with the minister, and her two youngest children were with Perry. She didn't know what to do. She found a shabby apartment in the worst part of Rocky Ford and settled there. Her rent was $90 a month, which was about all she could afford. To everyone's surprise, or depending on how well you knew the couple, maybe you weren't surprised at all. However, Sharon didn't like her life of squalor. She aborted her baby at 5 months and returned to Perry.
Jeez, 5 months. That's pretty far into the pregnancy, too.
Yeah. Judy Douglas, Sharon's sister, remembered the abortion was like nothing to Sharon. In fact, Judy knew of at least 5 abortions that Sharon had, and there may have been more during the years the two sisters were estranged. Sharon would stop by her sister's place on the way to Denver to get an abortion. Sharon treated her abortions like it was just this casual thing.
Like, oh yeah, I gotta do this thing real quick, but then I'll be over.
Right. And no one knows what Sharon said to Perry, but he welcomed his wife back with open arms. He acted like Sharon had never left him or never cheated on him.
Well, I mean, ultimately, she met the ultimatum that he gave her.
Exactly. One man who heard what happened said, "Don't underestimate the power of pussy." I hate saying that, but nothing on this earth can compete. But I mean, it did seem like Sharon understood this power more than anyone else.
Well, yeah, I mean, it seems like it.
Yeah, she always used this to her advantage. And she used this power she had when she met Gary Starr Adams. Sharon would later say that Gary was the love of her life. Police, detectives, and attorneys would say that Gary was her partner in crime. Down at the bottom of Cougar Ridge from where Sharon lived, there stood a ramshackle mobile home. Gary, his wife Nancy, and their young son lived in this home.
Oh, so she's going after another married man.
Yeah, a father, but yeah.
Not a doctor this time, though.
Not a doctor this time. Now, Gary, he also had an adult daughter who lived closer to Denver. Gary, he worked as a roofer, and he would work odd construction jobs throughout the area. Now, the first time Gary met Sharon, it was a very innocent meeting, at least for Gary. He had gone up and knocked at the Nelsons' door asking to see if they had a wheelbarrow that he could borrow. And Gary had known of Sharon. He said he had seen her around, and he knew that she was the doctor's wife. When he met her, she seemed interested. She seemed warm and cordial. He thought he had felt a spark there, but he just wasn't sure. What Gary didn't know is that there was more than a spark between the two. As soon as Sharon saw Gary, she set eyes on him. She wanted him, and she wanted him bad. And a Halloween costume party was the perfect kind of party. It was also the best way to get Gary back in her house so she can get to know him a little more intimately. Sharon went all out. She wore a long, yellow-brownish dress with a big, wide-brimmed hat. She looked like Gone with the Wind Scarlett O'Hara, and she made sure to add a Southern accent to match her Southern belle outfit.
Isn't she from Ohio?
It was all part of the act. Now, Gary dressed in a mountain man outfit. He wore a fringed leather shirt, leather pants, a hat, and a fake beard. It was the best getup because many referred to Gary as Sharon's mountain man, and Sharon might have thought so herself.
I feel like we entered a romance novel.
Now, a little bit into the party, Sharon swooped in between Nancy and Gary, and she asked if she could borrow Gary for a little bit. Now, if I were Nancy, I would have thrown my drink at Sharon's face. But Nancy may not have known about Sharon's reputation. Instead, Nancy allowed Sharon to dance with her husband. And that's when the seduction occurred. And her seduction was not subtle. She cooed in his ear. She whispered, "I love the smell of leather," while no one paid any attention to them. She pressed her breast against her mountain man's chest. Then she asked in a hushed voice, so only Gary could hear, "Why don't you come into the office on Thursday to get an eye exam, and we'll get to know each other a little better?" Her voice was sexy, southern, and sultry. Gary couldn't say no.
Couldn't refuse the offer.
No one could say Gary didn't know what he was getting himself into. He knew Thursdays were days that Sharon went to work, leaving Perry at home with their children, so the doctor would not be there to watch over them. While knowing this and seeing how she behaved towards him, Gary still planned on going. And that Thursday, Gary made the trip to the optometrist office. There was Sharon sitting behind her desk. She wore tight black pants and an orange, red, and white long-sleeved sweater. The outfit was form-fitting, but it looked great on Sharon. So the doctor's wife, Sharon, invited Gary into the back office. The same back office where she had started fooling around with her husband when the two had started their affair. In the office, Sharon got close, and Gary thought she was moving in to hug him. Instead, she gave him a kiss, and she started rubbing her crotch on his leg. If he didn't know for sure what Sharon wanted, the rubbing was a big indicator.
Yeah, big red flag. Was he still wearing leather?
I don't know that detail, but possibly. I wouldn't doubt it.
I think he was.
The problem with the optometry office is that it didn't give him enough privacy. There were clients coming in and out of the office, and they were only in the back office for a few minutes when a client would walk into the front room and Sharon would have to leave to attend to the client's needs. Sharon thought of a solution. She asked Gary to get a motel room. And at about 5 p.m., Gary called from a Best Western in Trinidad, and he gave Sharon the room number. And honestly, Sharon was a little annoyed. A professional at renting rooms for lovemaking, she knew the next time he would have to rent a room on the other side of the building. Someone might see my car. She explained why she wasn't a fan of the room he had. But for that day, the room worked. And although Sharon looked like a Playboy centerfold in her black bra and black panties, although she had no tan line, Gary could not get stimulated. Sharon did what she could, but she couldn't get Gary's penis to stand to attention. It was a little bizarre because this has never happened to Gary before. Gary would later say that she was trying to get me aroused. I just couldn't do it. Right then, it should have been a warning, saying my body knows more than my brain. It's just not right.
See, we did walk into a romance novel.
The fact that Gary couldn't get it up didn't bother Sharon. She still wanted to see him. They met several times more, but impotence was still a problem. Until they had a picnic date in the plateau above Trinidad Lake. This time, they didn't have to pay for a room. They spread a blanket underneath them, and the flowerland was their room. Finally, Gary was able to rise up to the occasion. Gary may have been satisfied with the sex, but his main concern was that he didn't pleasure Sharon enough. I didn't please you, he complained when they were done. Sharon said he did, but Gary didn't believe her. However, as they kept meeting for sex, Gary learned what techniques pleasured Sharon the most. There really was no stopping this couple. Sharon would say that he had a body like I'd never seen before on anyone. Not really muscular, but there was not an ounce that he didn't know how to use for whatever he chose to use it for. I never had anyone in my life who accepted me so totally in any stage. I could have been working out in my garden with sweat running down my neck, dirt between my toes, and it never detracted.
I mean, he is a mountain man, so standards.
Sharon enjoyed her moments with Gary. She loved having him as her lover, but she also wanted him for something else too. She wanted him to kill her husband. She no longer needed Perry in the picture. At first, Sharon approached the subject nonchalantly. She told Gary that Perry was becoming suspicious of them. She said, "If he catches us, he'll kill me. I swear he will." Gary didn't think anything about Sharon's comments. Instead, he just calmed her fears. He told her no one knew that they were having an affair, especially Perry. They were taking all the precautions. Sharon let the days pass. As time lingered, though, her desire to get out of her marriage with the doctor grew. Normally, getting a divorce wouldn't be a problem, but she didn't want to be penniless. She also knew it wasn't her fault that she wasn't unhappy in the marriage with the doctor. If Dr. Perry had continued being successful, making money, she wouldn't have been upset. She deserved to be rich. Never did she think she might have had something to do with her unhappiness. Sharon tried to approach the subject again. This time she used a different angle. She cried to Gary. She told him her husband abused her and the kids. "I'm afraid of him," she would say to her mountain man, her savior. Gary wanted to protect her. He never thought Perry could abuse his family, but he thought that no one ever really knows what happens behind closed doors. So then, as a joke, Gary asked, "Have you ever thought of him having an accident?" To his surprise, his lover nodded. She had thought of trying to get rid of Perry for years. Sharon told Gary that she and an earlier lover had actually tried to kill Perry during one of the earlier times they were separated.
Wait a second. That should be a red flag. I mean, you're not even special. It's like I had another dude to do this, but he didn't. Will you?
And I got rid of him. What happened to him?
Yikes.
Gary described what Sharon told him. He said they got Perry real drunk, pushed him into the pool, and from what Sharon says, they thought Perry was drowning. They were in the house. They just left him floating in the water face down. And a few minutes later, Perry comes knocking on the door. He couldn't remember what happened. He thought he just fell in.
Back from the dead.
Sharon told Gary she wanted a man who would get the job done. Gary wanted to be Sharon's hero. He was going to get the job done for her. Gary couldn't get the job completed the first time. It was June of 1983, and Gary had a friend who was supposed to help him. The two hung out in the cab of Gary's Datsun as they waited at a rest stop on I-25, located right outside of Castle Rock. And Gary knew Perry would be driving his black VW by sometime soon. And Gary's prediction was right. The doctor smiled when he saw his buddy Gary. He pulled his truck alongside him.
If he only knew what Gary had in mind for him.
Yeah. When Perry saw his friend, he pulled over to the side of the bar in Castleton for a few drinks, and there Gary introduced the doctor to his friend. Apparently, Gary was heading towards Denver, too. Who knew?
Coincidence.
Yeah, definitely was a coincidence that they meet up at the same location. It's weird, huh? Now, after the bar, the trio decided to go to a strip club, something Perry would have never done before he met Sharon. It was during this time that Gary initiated his plan. While Gary and Perry were using the bathroom, the new pal would add some knockout drops in the doctor's drink. Then it would be easier to kill the doctor once they left the club. Perry just took a few sips, and he became disgusted. The drink didn't taste good. It tasted flat. He didn't want to drink it anymore. Gary encouraged him to drink another drink. He told Perry his drink was fine, but Gary couldn't persuade Perry. Some may say that it was divine intervention. Who knows? However, Perry didn't get drunk. That night, the murder didn't go as planned. It didn't happen at all. It would be too much work to hit Perry over the head with a tire iron, especially since he was sober. The next morning when Perry returns home, Sharon becomes pale, almost like she's seen a ghost. Gary was supposed to kill Perry. She couldn't understand why her mountain man didn't do what he had promised. Sharon was disappointed in her lover, and her lover was ashamed he could not go through with what he had promised. And to try and please Sharon, Gary said that he would try it again, but he didn't want to do it right away. He didn't want to raise any suspicion. Sharon, she disagreed. No one had noticed anything this time. Perry didn't think anything happened. Anyways, he was going up for optometry classes in Denver the next month in July. That would be a good time. Gary didn't want to upset Sharon again, so he agreed with Sharon. And so, as a part of the second plan, Sharon invited Gary and Nancy up to the Roundhouse for dinner. And this wasn't strange at all because the two families usually had dinner together or played cards together. Sharon may have been sleeping with Gary, but she liked his wife. Sharon thought Gary's wife was pretty friendly. Now, during dinner, Gary took the opportunity to ask Perry if he could hitch a ride with him when he heads back to Denver. Gary told Perry, "I'm going up there to buy some mini 14s. Perry enjoyed collecting guns and hunting. Gary told him the guns that he wanted to buy were stolen, and he was hoping to buy them at a good price, $50 each. Perry thought he might buy one too. The plan was in motion. Perry thought nothing of giving Gary a ride. It was that fateful July 22nd, 1988 night. The drive from Trinidad to Denver is long, depending upon how you drive it. The drive could be as long as 6 hours or as fast as 4 hours. Perry drove and talked, and Gary listened. He wondered if he could really do this. It would hurt his family. Some doubt began to creep into his thoughts, but he pushed those thoughts away. Around 7 p.m., they stopped for a quick bite at Burger King. Perry's last meal was a chicken sandwich. And when it was raining, sheets came pouring down. 'Came 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 pouring down. ' It was hard to see, especially at night. It would be too dangerous to continue driving, and they did need their sleep. And so they decided to pull to the side at the tunnel near Clear Creek for some shut-eye. Gary got out of the car and said he had to take a leak, but he had something else in mind. He wanted to find the perfect weapon, the best rock. He walked along the creek searching for the rock that he wanted. It was dark, and there were a lot of rocks, and he tried to hold them, but some seemed too heavy. After searching for a few minutes, he finally found the one he could carry. Then he looked around. He needed to be able to remember the place when he returned. He wanted to be able to use that same rock. Then he called out to Perry.
Perry, I lost my watch down there. Can you give me a hand looking for it?
And Perry got out to help his friend. He knew his friend would do the same for him. He didn't care about the rain. He didn't think to ask if Gary wanted to wait until the morning when there would be more light to search for the watch. Instead, he grabbed his flashlight and went to help out a so-called friend. And the river was mean that night. The water raged. Perry looked around. He didn't notice Gary lifting a large rock. He slammed the rock across Perry's head. He used all of his strength. He didn't know how hard he had to hit Perry's head to crack his skull. All of his strength didn't work the first time. Perry was still alive. The blow caused him to fall to his knees. Blood and water ran down his face. The blow also surprised him. He jumped back up. He had to fight back. He was fighting for his life. Gary was also shocked. He didn't think Perry would get back up. Gary pushed him back down, and he tried to keep him down, although it was tough. Perry is much taller than him and weighs more than him. Now, usually he would have the advantage, but he's also injured in the head. Gary used his weight to keep Perry underneath the stormy water. That still wasn't enough. Perry wasn't able to give up either. He wanted to live. He wanted to be there for his children. Gary would later say, it was like a freaking horror movie. Then, suddenly, the current took Perry away. He floated away, and Gary watched his supposed friend drift to his death. And 3 days later, Gary moved in with Sharon to start a new life. Now, there's still a lot to unload with this story, although I'd hate to leave you hanging next week. You gotta stay tuned to find out what happened to Perry's body, the aftermath of his death, and more about Sharon's next victim.
Another one?
Yep.
And be sure to subscribe so you get that notification as soon as part 2 comes out.
Yeah, the part 2 and the conclusion of this story.
Thank you guys so much for supporting Crime Salad, and we'll see you next week.